Welcome to another Dragonlance Saga review episode. It is Misham Holmeswealth the 30th. My name is Adam, and today I'm going to give you my spoiler review of Kender, Gully Dwarves, and Gnomes, Dragonlance Tales Volume 2, edited by Margaret Weis and Tracy Hickman as per usual. Now, I will be spoiling this story, so if you don't want to hear, and in fact this is an anthology of a bunch of short stories, so if you don't want to hear what those are, I mean this is a really old novel. So you should have already read this by now, though it has probably been some time. If you don't want to know what is in it, then go watch something else. Go exercise, go for a walk, spend some time with your dog. And if you don't like dogs, well, there's something wrong with you. Seek mental health. Yeah, help, not health. Okay, anyway, the way these work is I'm going to give you a brief synopsis of the story, and I'll just riff on it a little bit. And just goes from story to story on down. And that's kind of it. It is a Thursday. I don't really have much else to do, so I'm hoping that you'll have fun. Now, if you are joining me live in chat, Anthony, always great to see you. Thanks for joining live. And you want to share thoughts on these stories, or maybe just riff about Dragonlance, throw up your questions, your comments, your thoughts, and I'll get to them in due course. All right, like I said, this is meant to be fun, so let's have a little bit of fun, shall we? All right, let's look at this here. This first story is called Snow Song by Nancy Varian Berberick. Now, this is a wonderful little story about Tasloff, Flint, Sturm, and Tanis traveling and getting caught in a storm. Tanis and Sturm went off in search of wood so that the group could survive through the night and were attacked by a pack of wolves. Taz, who was ordered to stay put, ended up leaving, of course, much to Flint's chagrin, and tried to use his supposedly magical flute to call out to his friends, bringing them home. Tanis and Sturm, after being attacked, fled with their packs of wood, but the cold and wounds became too much for them, and they remained in the snow on death's door. Taz's flute suddenly started blowing out a beautiful tune, and lost animals began showing up in the cottage that they were staying in. Flint was astonished, and Taz claimed it was due to the magical flute itself. He kept playing, and soon Tanis and Sturm heard the tune. The weather abated, and the pair found their way back to their cottage. I love that Taz saved everyone, but that's kind of what he does all throughout the Chronicles and Legends, so there's nothing really new. He is the R2-D2 of this universe. I really like the interplay again between Tanis and Flint on whether or not they should even bring Sturm. You know, there's the argument of he's not experienced enough, and the other counter argument is, well, how is he ever going to get experienced if we don't bring him? Surprisingly, it was Tanis that didn't want to bring him. Anyway, the back and forth between Flint and Taz is always great, so just had a lot of fun with that. This story actually reminded me of a potential camp out that me and a bunch of my buddies and our kids went on. It was like one of my friends and his daughter, one of his friends and his son, and then me and my son. We ended up going up into the Uinta Mountains, and it was at the tail end, like early spring. So we had to sort of fight through a bunch of snow in order to get to where we're going to be camping. But then just a wild blizzard hit us out of nowhere. And, you know, I don't know if you guys have ever been caught in a blizzard. It's really disorienting, even though you know the terrain and you can call out north, no matter where you are. When you can't see 2 feet in front of you, the terrain is gone to judge by. And it really comes down to thinking about the kids in that case. And so it was this moment where we're like, well, should we just set up a tent and all hunker in the tent until this blizzard blows over? And then we'll just go and find our way, to where we're going to normally camp. But no one else wanted to. They wanted to just go in their van and start drinking, which is mildly inappropriate with a bunch of kids around, but that's what happened anyway. So the kids were off talking about whatever the hell kids talk about, and the adults were all together going, we should have really just stayed up in the mountain. Anyway, it wasn't like we're going to die or anything, but it's still kind of scary if you're out there. Ben, thanks for joining live. How you doing? I agree. Flint and Taz's relationship is pretty dope. Like, they have a great back and forth, I mean, aside from the actual, like, care and concern that they have for each other, it's just fun to see them, like, fighting with each other, which is really dysfunctional, but it just works. All right. So this next one is called The Wizard's Spectacles by Morris Simon. Now, this is a tale about an old dwarf with poor eyesight that finds Dalamar as he is fleeing Sylvanesty after being cast out. This is right after Dalamar was deemed a dark elf, and cast out of Sylvanosti, and there's people hunting him, actually. So Dalamar's aware that he's being tracked, and one day goes missing, but leaves his things and a set of glasses behind. The dwarf ends up donning... Wait, an old dwarf with poor eyesight that finds Dalamar as he's fleeing Sylvanosti and is being cast out. So this dwarf invites Dalamar in to stay with him. So that Dalamar ends up fleeing and leaves behind all of his stuff, leaving a note telling the dwarf, look, I'm going to be back in about a month, so if you could just watch this, I will reward you handsomely as soon as I get back. Well, the dwarf is kind of just like, okay, no big deal, and then just starts snooping. Like, what else are you going to do? This is your house, right? So you start snooping through Dalamar's stuff, and he finds these spectacles, which he puts on, and suddenly his eyesight is perfect again, and he can read magic. So he starts rifling through scrolls and like categorizing the scrolls and stuff, and everyone in town thinks this is an old curmudgeonly old dwarf that really isn't anything of significance until he goes to town and starts casting the doggone scrolls, like scaring people and, you know, drumming up respect for himself through fear, through all these spells. It ends up where Dalamar returns for his stuff, and the dwarf ended up opening a portal to another realm, they say. So the abyss, an outer plane, who knows, who cares? All we know is a bunch of bad things start climbing through the portal that this ignorant dwarf opened. And Dalamar, as Dalamar would naturally do, draws this little pentacle around on the floor so he has a little bit of protection and subsequently closes the portal, but not before it actually ends up killing the dwarf. So Dalamar grabs his stuff and leaves. Well, it turns out that old dwarf had already ordered some goods to be brought over by the local merchant or goods store or whatever you would call it. And he comes and delivers all the goods, and he finds his friend dead. Like, that's the story. And that's not the only story in this. There's just, like, bad shit happens, man. Really kind of depressing down story, but like what else would happen, you know? If you don't know anything about magic and suddenly you can cast it for some crazy reason simply because you can read it, which also flies in all the face of every wizard that's ever learned how to cast spells, right? Because there's one thing to read the language of magic. It's another thing to be able to actually pronounce it correctly, do the semantic gestures with your hands, have the actual components. With scrolls, you don't need components. But I don't know. It was just like, with scrolls, do you not need to know how to like perform like hand gestures or something? It felt like it just sort of shit all over Raistlin when he was going in school trying to make the vowels sound as they're supposed to sound in the language of magic. And he was like trying so hard to get it to work right. And then suddenly this old curmudgeonly dwarf comes through and he's like, hey, hold my beer. And just starts casting spells left and right. Kind of crazy. It was a fun story, like straight up. Again, a little bit sad, but I do like getting a semblance of Dalamar, even though it's only brief. And we only get a little dusting of Dalamar in the story. It's nice to see Dalamar in his youth right after he's been cast out. And really, any Dalamar I can get, I'm good with. I really love this story arc that Dalamar goes on ultimately through the War of Souls. I think it's deserved and earned where he ends up. And it's just, I don't know. You know, he's one of those legacy characters that he was Raistlin's apprentice, you know? Like, how can you not feel connected to this guy some way? Okay, so the next one is, sorry, there we go. Is this right? Yeah, okay. So the next one is called The Storyteller, and it's by Barbara Siegel and Scott Siegel. It's about a storyteller who is imprisoned and executed by the Blue Dragon Army for treason for telling stories to Kender, dwarves, and gnomes. So the three races end up getting together and trying to free him, but in the end, he's still hung for telling the stories. Again, downer of an ending, but also kind of appropriate to where you are. So this is a brutal reminder about the price of standing up to a fascistic ruler and the importance of never allowing them a foothold in any community or society. The end of the tale relays that the man who was in prison with the storyteller has ended up picking up his role and is thus spreading his story. This reminds me of the human condition more than any other story thus far. As a species, we share stories. Sometimes they have morals or lessons embedded within them, and other times they're purely for entertainment. But the bottom line is that they move us. They shape our cultures and have power to overthrow governments. Stories are what binds us to our ancestors, and maintaining that tradition of crafting and telling them in this context is not lost on me. Role-playing is no different. We collectively tell a tale that we experience firsthand, together, shared. I thought the power of this was the community experience that he gained by telling stories, and how he genuinely believed that he would be saved. But ultimately, the reality of the people who were trying to save him just wasn't enough to overcome the dragon army. So he was stationed in, I think it was Sanction with the Blue Dragon army. And he had actually, am I thinking of the right story? Now I'm second guessing myself. Yeah. So he actually is brought in front of Kitiara right before she goes after Tanis and the companions who were fleeing on the Perishan ship. Right before she leaves to do that, she's trying to, wrap up all of the information. And she's like, look, you're telling stories to rile up people against us, so you're guilty. The punishment is death. And that's it. And she takes off. And so he's just sitting here going, but I'm just a storyteller. What are you talking about? I'm not trying to run up any political action at all. But that is how some governments are. The press, whether it's, I'm talking specifically about a storyteller, which is just, a creative, like a bard, basically going from town to town sharing stories, but like an entertainer, a musician. But there are people in the press who are literally killed all over the world just because organizations, governments, people in positions of power don't want the truth out. And so they will do anything they can to stifle that. And to see Kit do that really spins a new view on her. One is that she's always interested in her own personal semblance of power, and that anything else is sort of beneath her. And this is saying that no, she's actually much more caring about a foothold of the Dragon Army in Sanction and to stifle any potential rising up of the lesser races, as she calls them, which I never thought she even cared about before, because just through her actions, her soldiers loved her and adored her, and the leadership loved and adored her, and the people, it didn't seem like she crushed them as much as the other Dragon Army High Lords, and so I just didn't think that she would be like that, even though I know she doesn't really care about anyone else. So I don't know. It just added a little extra to Kitiara as a character for me. But mainly just that connection to storytelling. It's such a, it's the lizard brain in us that loves to carry that forward. I'm of Scottish ancestry, and so a lot of the majority of Scottish clans claim King Arthur as their forebear, which is ridiculous because if there ever was a King Arthur, it was much later than their ancient ancestors would have been. But it's part of the Celtic tradition of overblowing the importance of anyone's, either position currently or their ancestors' position of authority over others. It's what we do. We weave tales. Okay, so this next one's great too. A Shaggy Dog's Tale by Danny Peary. It's a tale that Tasselhoff Burfoot is telling a town's children, and it's about an evil man, formerly Red Dragon Army, who, after brutalizing the Quayshu village, took a woman as a slave in every way. She eventually escaped with her lover's aid, and he chased them, looking to kill them both. They entered Wayrith Forest, and the sorceress he ran across offered to take care of the man, the High Lord. Well, it's not a High Lord, it's just a Red Dragon Army soldier. He demands revenge on the lady for escaping him, the Quayshu girl, and nearly killed the two, I'm skipping ahead. So he demands revenge and nearly kills the two Quayshu when he finds them, but for a dog who pushes him down in a ravine, severing his spine. He woke in the crone's home again, being force-fed. He tricked her into healing him, and he left to kill the couple again, only to be placed in the exact same situation as if what had happened previously didn't occur at all. The crone removed his ability to speak as a punishment for having tricked her, and this was just a great story of just desserts that reminds me of a similar horror film tale. I subscribe to Shudder. It's a horror streaming service. I'm a huge horror nut. And there's this I can't remember the name of it, but it's on Shudder. Anyway, it's a story about this family who just finds this guy and his girlfriend who find themselves in just the middle of nowhere with this old couple. And it turns out the old couple is taking care of their daughter, but they removed her limbs and her tongue so that she couldn't talk back to them, and they just kept her in a box, and then they would feed her meat from time to time. Well, it turns out they wanted a granddaughter, and so they end up capturing the dude at the end. This is a huge spoiler, but still, it's a great story. They capture the dude, remove all of his limbs and his tongue, and they like manually make him have sex with their also handicapped daughter, or imprisoned daughter, whatever you want to call her. And it ends with him just sitting there staring at a TV on a bed with no limbs, trapped. It's the most horrifying notion ever. And it's exactly what this guy finds himself in. He can't move because he severs his spine. And as punishment, the crone removes his ability to speak. So he's literally just tied to a chair so he doesn't fall over. And he's trapped. And she's just shoving slug stew in his mouth, getting ready to love him, if you know what I mean. And I think you do. Little Joe Bob there. It's terrifying. It's the worst possible situation anyone could ever find themselves in. And it's wonderful to read about in its horror. He deserved it. He's a piece of garbage, right? So it's fitting. But the one thing that stuck out to me in the story that kind of bugged me, which should be the premise, but it's not, that really bugged me was that she's a sorceress, but she could supposedly heal him. Now, you can make the argument that she didn't actually heal him and he never actually left her in the first place because he went and did the exact same thing the second time. So it could have just been like this weird vision or something. But in either case, this story is presented as a sorceress healed his severed spine. Doesn't make any sense to me. That's a priest thing. That's not a sorcerer. And I know in Dragonlance, it all comes from the gods. But still, there's a separation between magic and divine magic. You know what I mean? So they should maintain that. Okay, this next one is another great one. Who doesn't love Lord Toad? So this is Lord Toad's Disasterous Hunt by Harold Bakst. Now, this is a wonderful tale about how two Kender, who were captured, then released by Lord Toad, were to be hunted and killed, but ended up leading Toad to his own death. They're chained together with a deer and were dragging it around, trying to fool Toad, and ultimately found themselves in a green dragon's lair. They ended up picking the lock from their legs and tying the deer carcass to the leg of the dragon. So as Toad entered to shoot the Kender with his bow, he ends up shooting the dragon in the nose instead, and his entourage freaks out and starts, of course, rightfully so, at the sight of a giant green dragon. And they start fleeing. He's yelling at them to come back and fight the beast, and the dragon just burns him up. That's the story. So it roasts Toad where he stood, and the Kenders got away. The tale is wrapped around this framing of a drunk Kender in an inn who is telling the tale unknowingly to one of Toad's entourage, who then finishes it and then tries to kill the Kender, chasing him out of the inn. And it all is wrapped up from the very beginning to the very end with the innkeeper going, this Kender's never going to pay his tab. And then he runs away so he can't pay his tab. It's a great little short story. I never read the Lord Toad novel, so I don't actually know if this contradicts his actual end or not. But I really enjoyed this story. It was just a lot of fun. Lord Toad is such a goofy, comedic hobgoblin character, All right, so this next one, oy vey. This is called Definitions of Honor by Richard A. Knack. This hit a little too close to home for me. The story is about a knight of Solamnia seeking to prove himself. He comes to a town that has this fearful minotaur further downshore. They beg him to go slay the minotaur. So he goes to slay the beast, only to discover that the minotaur is actually an individual who would like to speak about honor. It's ultimately revealed that he has dishonored himself in his culture by questioning the concepts of his people's honor through their actions. He was then exiled and told to flee, or if he stayed and fight in his place of exile, he would restore his family or maintain the family's honor, but not his own. So obviously he chooses to fight, and he's ultimately killed by insurmountable odds. His kin, who defeated him and dealt the final blow, asked the knight to end up burying the body. And the story talks about what honor really is versus what institutions and time allow it to be. It questions behaviors that are destructive in the name of honor and how foolish they are. And at the heart of this story are two soldiers connecting over honor. It really makes me think of the myriad of soldiers that I've connected with over the years and how very proud I am of their service, and how civilians, like the townspeople, will never understand what sacrifice through service means, and how, in the end, no one usually hears about the individual who lost their life for something greater. I've really enjoyed this story. It just hit those right notes in my own life experience, and then just reading Dragonlance and just sort of being in that area of honor and sacrifice. And it's crazy because he goes back to the townspeople and they're wanting to throw this big festival and feast on behalf of the Knight of Slamnia for supposedly killing the Minotaur. But the Knight of Slamnia never clarifies it, saying, no, I didn't kill him, but he is dead. And they wanted to go and collect the body and, drag it up and throw it up on a pig pole or something. And he could have easily just said, no, I buried the Minotaur. I didn't kill him. And it was an honorable man, an honorable Minotaur, an honorable creature. And you need to learn a little doggone respect. It reminds me of the scene in A Few Good Men when Jack Nicholson is like, you don't know the truth. You can't handle the truth. You need men on that wall. You need us to, I'm paraphrasing here. You need us to be up on that wall because we do things that you could never do with your delicate sensibilities. And as brutal of a truth as that is, it is still the truth. There are things that are abhorrent that a civilian would never consider doing, that is asked and demanded of on soldiers. And they do it. They do it because of the supposed greater good, or they do it because it is an ugly truth of war. Whatever the reason, there are things that soldiers have to do, like die, so that you and me can sit here talking on a stupid fucking video channel. Sorry, I'm going to step off my soapbox before I start freaking out. All right, this next one. It always gets to me, talking about stuff. Hearthcat in Winter Wren by Nancy Varian Berberick is a tale about a wizard who wanted a woman but was rejected. She's turned her into a bird. Her lover was turned into a cat. The wren looked for help and found Tasselhoff. Taz followed her and was turned into a squirrel. The companions all went looking for Taz, following the bird who told them about the wizard. Raistlin ends up turning the companions all into animals, and they spring a trap on the wizard, and who it seems Raistlin ends up turning into a bird carving. This was a bit of a rough tale to get through. It felt more like a Brothers Grimm story than a Dragonlance one, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just it felt out of place to me. I like the idea of being in an animal form. You soon lose your sense of self, and that was happening to Tasselhoff as the squirrel. But ultimately, there was no real trap sprung. They just sort of knocked on the door, and the wizard opened the door, and all the animals jumped in at him. That was kind of it. So it was a bit anticlimactic, considering what stakes were involved. But what are you going to do? They can't all be gold, right? Got to have a stinker or two. And we've got some stinkers in this. All right, the next one, I've reviewed this. This is Wanna Bet by Margaret, Weis, and Tracy Hickman. This is the true precursor to Dragons of Summer Flame, if there ever was one. Now, I've reviewed this in the past with another anthology, so I'll try not to repeat myself, but the premise is that Majere's sons are absconded by Reorx's avatar in order to retrieve the Graygem. The problem is that Reorx is a degenerate gambler. He loses their armor, weapons, and nearly their freedom before they reclaim the Graygem and then subsequently lose it again. The real standouts of this novel are the brothers Tanin, Sturm, and mainly Palin. He finally gets the respect he's earned from his brothers, and together they rely on each other wonderfully. It really makes me wish that they spent more time writing about them before the tragedy of the beginning of Summerflame. All that being said, I like the reality presented that men left to their own devices make war and disharmony, but educating women is the first step to stemming that chaos. And this is echoed in our own human history. Educated individuals traditionally make better life choices and are less able to be convinced of incredible, obvious lies. In any society, if we want to have an improved sense of life and a knowledgeable citizenry, we really should work for free higher education, and healthcare should be mandatory free. It just makes so much sense, and the only reason why it's not done, again, this is not a political channel, so I'm not going to get into all of that, is because of big business. And that's it. They're people, I guess. All right, so I really enjoy this story. It's crazy. It's insane. It doesn't make a lot of logical sense, and it's not supposed to. It's about chaos. It's about a god trying to recapture what he created and chaos trying to stop him. There's something kind of cool in that. And then it has that wonderful old school trope of a bunch of women in a castle, and they get young men coming in and they throw themselves at the young men. And like when I saw it in, first, of course, I saw it in Excalibur, which is brilliantly done. But then also it was done in Monty Python and the Holy Grail, really funny, which is just great. And just seeing it here was much more Monty Python than anything else. Now that I'm thinking about it, I can't even remember if it was actually an Excalibur, if I'm just projecting that from Monty Python. But anyway, what's important is the absurdity of it. And it gets absurd. But anyway, it's one of the stories that everyone has read. It's in like 3 different anthologies or something like that. So, read it. Do yourself a favor, I guess. All right, here's the next one. Oy vey. This one. Oh my gosh, this one. Into the Heart of the Story by Michael Williams is a tough read. Anytime gnomes are set as the narrator, authors seem to think that it's fun and funny to run on endlessly like a gnome would. It never is. That's fine when it's truncated for the sake of a narrative, but when the entire story is a gnome refuting the events of the chronicles and legends and then inserting themselves into the heart of the story, it becomes very tiring very quickly. Add in footnotes and a myriad of literary references, and you have a challenging and not altogether enjoyable read. Now, I understand the concept. I appreciate the author, but I will never read this short story again. It gave me a minor headache, if I'm being honest. It kind of pissed me off. It's so frustrating when you read, it makes perfect sense because anytime any race encounters a gnome, they get headaches and it bothers them. But there's ways of doing it to sell the idea without actually giving the reader a damn headache. Like, it's so frustrating. When they think it's so funny and they throw in all these little quips and footnotes and run-on sentences to try to explain the context of the statement that the creature just said, and then winding back and trying to re-examine it through different... No, just stop. It sucks. Stop with the damn gnome narratives. They're not fun. They're not funny. They straight up just blow. It's so frustrating. It's echoed like in the XDM 2 second edition manual that I reviewed. That's what they do. It's just like run-on jokes and little footnote puns and I hate it so much. I'm just not the audience for that. I would be interested if someone did enjoy this, because I would like to know what exactly you enjoyed about this story. Because beyond me, it's totally beyond me. I can't figure it out. It sucks. I hate it. But I do like Michael Williams. He's a wonderful human being. All right. I have nothing else to say about that. Don't like it. Dagger Flight. This is the last story in this collection by Nick O'Donohoe. This is a tale of an intelligent dagger given life by Takesis to kill Flint, then the other companions. Ultimately, because of the course of the dagger's use, it's taken and used by nearly every companion. It tries to kill many of them, even flying at them on its own accord, but because it's a dagger, it only has a single trajectory arc, and every attempt fails. But it does taste the blood of the companion's victims, namely goblins and draconians, which it does not appreciate. It's a great little tale that kept me interested and engaged with the flow of it, but ultimately there's not a lot of meat there. You know what I mean? It's just like retelling the companion's Dragons of Autumn Twilight adventures through the lens of a dagger that's trying to kill them. So, you know, it is what it is. All right. So what do you guys have to say here? Hey, Chris, thanks for joining live. How you doing? Hey, Jason, good to see you, man. You're saying gnome, more gnome narrative stories. Yeah. Yeah, I am. Oy vey. So the story you vaguely remember that discusses why you didn't need to hand gestures when reading a scroll, and it has to do with having done the somatic portion while transcribing the scroll. Okay, that makes sense then, Anthony. Thanks for clarifying that. Whenever you have a moment, you have a question, have these books been inspired by D&D games? Or is Krynn so popular it's been adapted into D&D? So Dragonlance came out of Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. TSR was looking for a new campaign world, and they had all of their game designers pitch them different worlds. Tracy Hickman and a small team of people all worked together to really formulate Dragonlance and sold it. So Dragonlance came out of Dungeons and Dragons. The first novel and half of the second novel, Dragons of Autumn Twilight and Dragons of Winter Night, followed very much D&D conventions, right? So when someone casts something, you know, they do like the hand movements and they pull out spell components, and it's like, you know, the fighting, you can almost hear the dice being rolled through all the fighting sequences. But that got tiring, and the fact is that Margaret Weis and Tracy Hickman were writing the novels faster than the modules, mainly written by Douglas Niles, could be released. And so they ended up ignoring the novels after Dragons of Winter, or I'm sorry, ignoring the modules after Dragons of Winter Night, and just sort of doing their own thing with the final novel and the subsequent novels. So, to my understanding, the only book that really follows Dungeons and Dragons conventions is Dragons of Autumn Twilight, and everything else is kind of, let's just tell a good story with the novel. So I hope that clarifies it. You always thought Toto was interesting as being the only non-human dragon High Lord. I mean, there was Fielthas, who was an elf from Sylvanisty. Yeah, he just stumbled into it. Like, no one ever actually chose him, I don't think. I cannot imagine a universe where Eric was like, yeah, I want the hobgoblin that can't even walk because he's so out of shape. Let's get that guy to be my new High Lord, right? That was weird. I don't know. Hey, Michael, thanks for joining live. I'm doing good here. Knife of Tears. What? There's Dagger Flight. I don't know what you mean by Knife of Tears. All right. Yeah, I really need to read the Toad novel. Like, I've got to read I really want to read the Verminard one, the Toad one, and I think the Black Wing, I think, is about Kisanth, I think, if memory serves. There's a Takisa story that's supposed to be good. There's another, like, Festinanilus story, which I hear half of it's good, the other half is kind of garbage. But there's so much that I want to really dive into. It's just like, I don't want to get sick of reading Dragonlance, so I'll read a Dragonlance book, and then I'll read another different book, and then I'll go back to Dragonlance and read something else. So, for example, I just started the Star Wars Shadows of the Sith novel that just came out. Loving that so far. But yeah, you gotta break up the Dragonlance, or else you're just gonna go crazy. Especially if you're making videos on top of it every week. You know, it gets rough. So, do I recall any cool storylines that came out of home Dragonlance game sessions that would have made a good book? I honestly think, I mean, this is just me tooting my own horn here, but on this channel, the gaming playlist, I did a series with Derek and one of his friends about in the Dungeons and Dragons adventure system, board games. And it was a whole campaign based around, well, there's two different campaigns, right? So one of them was based around the Knights of Solamnia locating a hidden portal to the abyss underneath the High Clerist's Tower, which is why the High Clerist's Tower was built there in the first place, in order to subdue in the Age of Might this portal and to sort of guard over it. It's all just made up by me. It's not official canon or anything. But I thought that was a great premise to a storyline. And then you fast forward all the way to the Age of Mortals, where the High Clerist's Tower is ostensibly decimated. The knighthood is fighting within themselves, and heroes have to go and dive into the High Clerist's Tower and close that door for good. And you're going to be facing potential demons. You're going to be facing undead monstrosities and everything. I had Chemish as the bad guy in that one. I thought that was a great storyline. The first storyline that I did with that series of board games was that the heroes were going to raid a tomb underneath Dergard Keep, Lord Soth's keep, in order to find some sort of device to stop him, to end his life for good. And they ended up getting transported to Ravenloft just like he did at the same time. And so now they have to fight their way through his keep and find a bunch of devices in order to find their way back out. And then, it ultimately leads to Lord Soth getting out as well. But that's just, it's a mix between the actual Lord Soth novels in Ravenloft, but also just a little bit of fun, creative storytelling on my part to have players invested in the firsthand experience of that as well. So that was a lot of fun. I have not read that. That's what I was talking about. I think that's called Blackwing or something like that. I don't know, Wings of Black, or I don't know, that's what it is. But no, Jason, I have not read that yet. I do want to. A dagger that flies around and tries to kill its user reminds you of the Sword of Tears. Oh, okay. From Sargon from Legend of Human Reavers. Yeah, no, this is... It was weird when they was describing this because it is just a dagger, right? And this is the Dagger Flight story by Nick O'Donohoe that I'm talking about now. So it talks about the dagger like having fangs and like flying with wings, but then its wings was really just the hilt guard. And I don't know, the way it presented it was very, very obscure. And I can't imagine no one noticing that this dagger was flying around trying to kill the companions. Like there was a moment in the story where like Raistlin was staring at it and the dagger is sentient in the dagger's mind. Was like, oh shit, he's onto me, right? But then Raistlin starts talking about the constellations missing in the sky at Crystal Mirror Lake. So like, I don't know. It was just a really strange, sort of quirky, fun story. But yeah, what are you gonna do? All right, I think that's all I have. Yeah, most of my other D&D sessions in Dragonlance were so long ago that I don't really remember them that well. Yeah, I don't have a lot of vivid memory because it was when I was younger, it was before my military service, and that was 20 years ago. So it was even further back than that I was really into playing those, and it was mainly first and second edition D&D, and I don't know. I don't think we really worried about complex storylines as much as I do nowadays. Like the story that I'm doing right now in the one shot, which ended up being a two shot because I don't know how to plan time gaming because I haven't done it in so long. I think it's a great little storyline that, again, because I'm obsessed with Lord Soth, it's intimately involved in Lord Soth post Legends and, before Summer of Flame. So it's this really great tight-knit little storyline where it's not going to end happy. It's not going to be a pleasant experience probably for the players. But as far as the story is, it's just a nice little, oh, that's how that happened. So hopefully it'll be good. Hopefully it'll be entertaining. Sounds like a cool campaign. Looking forward to part 2 of the XD. Yeah. And that's in 2 days. That's this Saturday. So if you guys are not doing anything this Saturday at noon Mountain Time, we plan on just sort of finishing up the little adventure. It's probably going to take an hour or two to do that. But hopefully it's going to be entertaining. There's going to be some twists in it. And anyway, I hope you guys enjoy it because I know I do. This is the first time I'm DMing in, again, 20 years. Like, it's been a very long time. All right, so that is all I have for my review of Kender, Gully Dwarves, and Gnomes, Dragonlance Tales Volume 2. What did you think of the anthology? Are there any stories that stick out as a favorite, or are there any stories that you will never want to read again like me? You can email me at info@dlsaga.com or leave a comment below. I would like to take a moment and remind you to subscribe to this YouTube channel. ring the bell to get notified about upcoming videos, and click the like button. All this goes to help other Dragonlance fans learn about this channel and its content. And this channel is all about celebrating the wonderful world of the Dragonlance Saga. Thank you for joining me. My name's Adam. Until next time, Sanjivar. That's a great idea, Chris. You're going to have to think about that.